It's the week ending Saturday the 31st of October, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen President Macron declaring a second national lockdown in France, footballer Marcus Rashford achieving over 1 million signatures for his petition to extend free school meal vouchers, and the death of comedian and entertainer Bobby Ball at the age of 76. But we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann. Let's unwrap the week. And joining me today from the week's digital team is the boss man Holden Frith. From Money Week, we have Mr. John Stepek, and we welcome back freelance journalist Suchandrika Chakrabarti. And Holden, we should just briefly pause to commemorate this being our historic 200th edition of the show. Was it money well spent?
Absolutely. I think this is how we expected to be celebrating our double century, all sitting at home with blankets behind us and telephones clamped to our ear.
Well, you chose not to appear on the first edition in January 2017, so I wonder if you had your doubts, but they've all been proven wrong.
I'm firmly with you today.
Part of broadcasting history, Holden, indeed. Anyway, starting the show this week, it is Suchandrika. What do you think this week, this historic week of our 200th edition, will be remembered for?
Surely it's now you can live like your favourite TikTok influencer.
TikTok and Shopify announcing a partnership today. That news sending Shopify shares up 4.3%. That partnership will enable Shopify's 1 million merchants to easily advertise their products to TikTok's 100 million monthly active users with shoppable video ads that TikTok users can then click on and then complete a transaction on Shopify's site.
CNBC's Julia Boorstin reporting on a new initiative which seemed to involve the words shoppable, ads, TikTok and Shopify. Suchandrika, what does it all mean?
Yeah, so the exciting news that TikTok, which I think is everyone's favourite app on this podcast. Yeah.
We're all banging the demographic.
Yeah. So now you can buy stuff directly through TikTok, which will not terrify parents of teenagers one bit. I'm sure it'll be fine. So they've got a new deal with e-commerce platform Shopify. And the retailer already partners with Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, as well as Amazon and Google. So they've got a lot of the social media side, as well as the big shop side. And they're going to make shoppable video ads, which can sell you stuff directly to your phone. You can click, buy it and go. It's being rolled out in the US from this week, and it'll be available to us in Europe and to Southeast Asia next year. So it's something to look forward to.
Yes, okay. So it's new in the US and in Europe, but it's actually been a growing trend in China, this, hasn't it? So it's not a surprise.
Yeah, so China through WeChat and various other kind of apps that are huge in China but less well known over here. They've been working with the social commerce sort of world for a really long time. There's lots of money to be made, and really we're kind of a bit behind over this side of the world, and it's time to start making money. Apparently, TikTok generated $115.3 million US dollars in user spending last year. So it's about time we do something with that in the way that China's been doing it.
And the distinction is, just so I'm clear, because I'm I'm reliably informed there are ads on TikTok for your big brands, your Adidas and McDonald's or whatever. What's different here is that individual users who happen to have a side hustle running an online store, they'll be able to sell their stuff too.
Exactly. So it's a bit, like taking influence and making it into something that's actually hard cash. You can see someone using something or wearing something and think, I would love that for myself. Click through and then buy it on the Shopify platform where you can go through the checkout.
So, John, this idea of sort of everyone on TikTok being able to sell stuff, having that ability, a bit like YouTubers can see their own ratings, I guess, and work out what kind of films to make in response to viewer demand. That's a good thing, isn't it?
I think it's a great thing. You would probably expect me to say that, being the die-hard capitalist, pro-free markets kind of person that I am.
Thank you for catering for any new listeners there.
Yeah, exactly. Just giving you the backstory. But no, it's a great idea because, for a start, it's not that unusual. I mean, the reason that we have things like influencers, etc., is because companies think that, people want to buy goods that they've seen advertised by these people. So really all you're doing is reducing steps in the middle. And that's almost what e-commerce has been about the whole time. The real genius at Amazon, for example, is not so much purely the kind of, I can just buy something online. It's the fact that they make it so easy. When you go on your phone, you think, I need this thing. You instantly click the app, you find the object and you swipe once and that's it, you've bought it. It's basically reducing the friction between the purchasing choice and the purchasing action. Now, obviously that can cut in a number of ways, but overall I think it's a good thing that it democratises it as well for small producers.
Yeah, so Holden, do you think there's likely to be a quality control issue here?
Yeah, I think there's a few potential disadvantages, and it's interesting that TikTok outside China has chosen to use Shopify as a partner. In China itself, it has decided not to go with any external partners and forced both merchants and users to stick within its own payment platform. That means it has control over the data. It has more control over who is able to sell and who isn't. Outside China, it will be using the Shopify platform, as we've spoken about. That means it has less access to data, which may help it politically, given that it's embroiled in a debate with the US government at the moment. But it does
mean... Yeah, because Shopify are based in Canada, aren't they?
That's right. Shopify is based in Canada. The US is forcing TikTok to effectively sell its US operations to a US-based company. Politically, I think it's probably decided there's less risk if it allows a Canadian-based company to handle all of the user data in the US and beyond. But that does mean that issue of quality control is much harder because it's down to individual merchants and there's no central control over who can sell anything on the platform.
Do you think, Suchandrika, this gives Shopify a huge power boost as well? I noticed that their stocks went up shortly after this announcement.
They definitely did, didn't they? So in terms of some numbers that really help that stock probably go up, TikTok is 800 million monthly users. Facebook still is 2.7 billion, but people are leaving that platform, as I think we all notice. I'm only on Facebook for groups. Like everything else, there's a lack of engagement. People don't log on as much, whereas TikTok is actually growing. There's 1 billion video views a day. That's just crazy to me. 90% of users who visit the app go more than once a day. And guess how long they spend each time they visit?
Oh, I like a game show round. I'm going to say 12 minutes.
12 minutes for Ollie. Holden?
I'd say much shorter, actually, because the videos are mostly short. So I'm going to say 90 seconds.
90 seconds. John?
Oh, I'm going to go for 20 minutes.
52 minutes.
52!
There we
Nearly
go. Well
an
done.
hour. So I think that's the stat, isn't it? So people are going on more than once, and when they're watching almost an hour. Like, if you think of it,
which means probably like 200 different creators, doesn't it?
It means a lot of adverts. If you compare it to a TV slot of 22 minutes, how many? Do you have like 5 ads and ad break? 2-3 ad breaks, 15 ads. This is incredible. The amount of stuff. It makes me feel. It's like when you have children and you're at the supermarket checkout and they used to have sweets there. It's almost like that level and that enticing. And who knows where it will go? Like maybe the users will learn to tune them out. You could go either way, couldn't it? But that is a lot of time on that app.
And to take the supermarket analogy and extend it, it's like the sweets at the supermarket, but if there's no parents and instead of having a few coins in their pockets, children have access to the family credit card.
Just to put a bit of a damn squib on this, though, you're placing a great deal of faith in the technology, Suchandrika, but this is basically video slideshows. This is a bit, isn't it, when Facebook Groups animates a couple of photos and says, look, you can turn your page into an advert. It doesn't look that great, really. I mean, it's all run by a computer. It might be great in 10 years' time. Is it going to be a huge cash boost to TikTok users?
I think this is the problem whenever you introduce ads at quite a kind of high frequency onto any app. That tends to be the point that it pushes off users who are not that engaged and not that invested in the app, and they go, I'm really sick of these ads. They do look exactly like the videos, but I don't care, I can see them a mile off. I'm going to go to X app, which none of us know what that'll be called and we won't be on it, and they're going to move on. So I think ads can also be the kiss of death, and who knows again which way this will go.
Well, we are going to move on. John, you're up next after this. Okay, John, your turn. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
Is this when cryptocurrency turned respectable?
This is like Bitcoin, put on a business suit, got an MBA, went to business school, decided to become respectable, right? It's a cryptocurrency, but it's backed by one of the world's biggest banks. It's going to be a walled garden. Not the public can't use it. Only people who are institutional clients who've been vetted for KYC, anti-money laundering, can use it.
KYC, know your customer.
Know your customer. And most importantly, it's for people to send institutional payments, cross-border payments, things like if debt issuance, if IPOs move to the blockchain, this is a way for a payment rail to happen.
CNBC banking reporter Hugh Sun on the launch of JP Morgan Chase's digital currency JPM Coin last year. John, what's been happening this week?
Well, this week JP Morgan announced that JPM Coin is now being used commercially by a big client for the first time to actually process cross-border payments, which is the point of this particular cryptocurrency. Just to make it, cut a very long story short, sending money across borders involves an awful lot of admin, and JP Morgan's cryptocurrency coin is designed to circumvent a lot of that admin, which is both more profitable for the banks and also more profitable for the people sending cross-border payments.
But basically, they launched it last year, and now it seems they've got their first kosher client, and blockchain payments are finally happening. It's no longer just for nerds to pay for drugs.
Well, this is it. The thing is, this is only for institutions. So this is slightly different to Bitcoin, but it does come hot on the heels of the news last week that PayPal, obviously big payments provider, now plans to allow its users to buy and sell Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies on its platform. So there are two different things here, but JP Morgan's currency, if you like, is a manifestation of blockchain technology, which is obviously the underpinning technology that runs Bitcoin. And that's a way for them to use it with a select number of fellow banks to facilitate cross-border transactions in a quicker and cheaper way. Obviously, Bitcoin itself and PayPal's involvement is more about the individual users, so the likes of me and you deciding, actually, I'd like to get some exposure to Bitcoin because it seems to be going up or going down, and using PayPal's platform to buy and sell those currencies.
But there's a snag, isn't there?
There's a snag with the PayPal one because literally, see, when you first hear this, you think, right, does this mean that I'm going to be able to buy stuff directly with Bitcoins?
Yeah.
And this isn't the case. What you can do is you can buy Bitcoin on the PayPal platform, and then you can also sell it on the PayPal platform. But if you want to buy something, then what happens is PayPal converts it back into the sterling or another currency. So you're not actually purchasing things directly with Bitcoin. In effect, all you're doing is more a way of allowing people to bet on whether it's going to go up or down. Because whenever you buy Bitcoin via PayPal, you can't then take it back off the platform and use it elsewhere, which is the whole point of Bitcoin.
So, I mean, Holden, it seems to me quite revealing that we don't know who this commercial client is that's using JPM Coin for their transactions. And when it comes to PayPal, they don't really have the confidence to let us withdraw the Bitcoin that we're buying on their platform. So, I mean, John's saying this could be a shift, but there's obviously still a lot of nervousness around this.
Yeah, I think I would personally be more confident about the commercial application for it and the sort of big institutional banks and other organizations that need to transfer very large amounts of money, because any small increase in speed, in security, in reliability, there's money that they can make from that. And even if it's a fraction of a percentage on what they're transferring, JP Morgan on average transfers $6 trillion of cash around the world to between 100 countries every day. So if they can make 0.001% extra on that, they're going to take that opportunity. And the technology underpinning it gives them a huge amount of control. But that, in a way, is almost the opposite of what Bitcoin is meant to be about. Bitcoin's meant to be about removing institutional control, removing government control from currency. And I think that's the area where the way it's actually playing out in terms of the adoption really doesn't match the aspirations. Bitcoin was meant to be this free-floating currency that anyone could use. It reduces risk. It reduces transfer fees. What it's actually become is a huge financial bet, essentially. And I don't think most people who are using PayPal want to change their online transactions into a gambling exercise.
Well, unless, I suppose, the last however many years, 8 or so, of people banging on about Bitcoin, in the news media has whetted their appetite a bit. I mean, Suchandrika, I don't know when you first heard the word Bitcoin. I definitely did a piece on it for Radio 5 Live in 2013. And actually getting your hands on some is just so complicated and difficult, whatever people say. You really do need a level of technical fluency and you need to really work at it. That maybe there are people out there who have been primed to think, at last, here is a mainstream way for me to try it.
I just really like the thought of Bitcoin on PayPal. Like the next time we actually were allowed to go out for dinner with friends, paying your friend back and just being like, it's in Bitcoin on your PayPal. Thank me later. It'll be good for you in the 2050s. It is really interesting. And I think, we've been using the word bet quite a lot. There's a kind of gaming quality to this idea of cryptocurrency. It still feels very not tangible, and of course it isn't tangible as a currency. And there's something about like watching the beginnings of the internet. How is this going to disrupt institutions? The politics behind it are kind of like anarchic libertarianism, but in reality, do people actually trust it? Do they actually want to get hold of it? Do they want to actually pay for things with it? And I think talking about it in the middle of a pandemic, there's a bigger issue that we're becoming more of a cashless society, but that leaves behind the most vulnerable. So, I was just reading a piece on Age UK, and obviously, like, older people can have issues with, with even just your general debit cards and other forms of cashless money. But really, it's low income rather than age that's the biggest indicator of cash dependency. So we're talking about people with money and privilege and time and an economic understanding who can play with cryptocurrencies, but we're actually sort of leaving behind the people who might have had a job in January but now are on universal credit and are kind of thinking, well, how am I going to get my next shop in? Is that shop going to take my card? Do I need to get cash from somewhere to get my essentials? And I think that for me is probably the more pressing problem. I don't think those people are going to start trusting Bitcoin tomorrow.
But I do wonder, Suchandrika, internationally, whether there's a case for younger people who can kind of leapfrog over the complexities of mainstream banking, who have gone from cash basically to this. Maybe people who don't trust their government, who are keener to hide assets away, who are working for clients in North America anyway, who will say, yeah, pay me in Bitcoin.
Who knows? I mean, as a freelancer, I work for American publishers quite often, and it is annoying getting paid. PayPal take a lot of fees off it. There are other ways you can deal with it. There are international bank accounts and so on, but it does take time to get your money. And it's frustrating. But I think with crypto, you're kind of accepting a whole new system that's, currency that doesn't come from a government's bank. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know if we can actually take it off the system. Well, PayPal won't let us take it off the system. So I think there is a level of trust and fear when it's this currency that you can't touch, you can't put in your pocket, you don't know who's actually issuing it. And I found, I think it's quite a famous op-ed about the libertarian fantasies of cryptocurrencies. It's a Martin Wolf op-ed from the FT from last year. And he says the state can be a dangerous monster. That's kind of what the people behind crypto feel, but it's also essential. It's humanity's ultimate insurance mechanism. The world of anarchy is one of competing bandits. So at least when it's your government issuing the money, there's this kind of assurance, and without it, I think that trust won't help crypto become mainstream.
It also, John, gives a paper trail, doesn't it? It being, done through JP Morgan and PayPal, which is one of the things those libertarians Suchandrika is referring to wanted to avoid.
I mean, to be fair, Bitcoin itself actually does have a paper trail. The blockchain is a paper trail. It's the one that's not traceable back to the person that's used it. I mean, the one thing I would sort of take some issue with some of the points there, perhaps rather, I guess, just provide a different perspective. The point about Bitcoin is that because of the way it's produced, it doesn't have an issuer. And so what the purpose of Bitcoin is to circumvent this thing of a central bank issuing as much currency as it wants to, for the government to have in circulation. So the point is that Bitcoin's designed to get rid of the need for trust because it's issued by a completely distributed group of computers working on it. In effect, no one person controls it, and it doesn't have any counterparty. In other words, it's not reliant on a specific government remaining in power or a specific economy continuing to operate. Because if you think about it across history, all empires have fallen, all currencies, all paper currencies have failed over some period of time. So partly Bitcoin is almost like meant to be digital gold. It is completely impractical for transactions because obviously in 2017 it was worth $20,000. Today it's worth $13,000. In 2012 you could buy them for about $100. So if something's going to fluctuate that much in value, then you can't really pay for your coffee with it. But yeah, the other problem obviously is that you're right. People don't trust Bitcoin. And the fact that we need big institutions to kind of make it acceptable to the mainstream does show you that the idealists, if you like, are really up against human nature and reality, which is that most of us can't be bothered jumping through loads of hoops just to kind of spend a bit of money.
From an investment point of view, though, I know that you're not going to sit there and say, yeah, go ahead, put your life savings into Bitcoin on PayPal. But if someone wanted to flutter, $10, $100, $1,000, and just thought, well, I can afford to lose that and I want to see what happens, what would you say to them?
I would say you should. Actually, I would say you should go ahead. I think, actually, if I'm honest, everyone should own a little bit of Bitcoin if they have the money to spare. And when I say that, you're right. I mean, you could just buy £50 worth or whatever and just leave it sitting there. I mean, in terms of places to get it, you usually have to go into a cryptocurrency exchange and you set up a wallet and then you fund the wallet and then you can kind of leave the money sitting on there. And this is one reason why people don't do it, because it is a bit more of a faff than putting money in a bank account or opening a bank account. It's getting a little bit more user-friendly, but it's still pretty tricky. Anytime I talk to anyone under the age of, say, 25 in the office, they're all incredibly au fait with cryptocurrencies and they all despise banks. Now, in lots of cases, I think that their views are somewhat misinformed and that they don't understand how risky cryptocurrencies are.
It's your fault. You've been banging on about 2008 for 10 years.
You're right. I mean, you're right. It's back to 2008. That's the reason they don't trust the banks. They see the banks as the man and cryptocurrencies as being the thing that will get them out.
By the way, John, just before we leave this, I'm just curious. I'm not expecting a full detailed answer here. But what happened to Libra? Weren't we all supposed to be using Facebook's digital money by now?
Oh, actually, I mean, that's a really interesting point because this goes to the other big issue about this. This is not just about whether digital currency will take off or not. Digital currency is the future, whether we like it or not. It's about who controls it. And Bitcoin is not meant to be controlled, whereas all of the central banks in the world, including very explicitly China, are looking at digital currencies because as soon as your central bank issues a digital currency, that opens the pathway to them getting rid of cash. As soon as they get rid of cash, they essentially have control over everything that you spend and the amount of money in your bank account at any given time. That means they have full economic control over their entire population. Now, if you're living in the West, you might think, oh, big deal, we get CCTV everywhere and nobody abuses it, etc. But it's that there's a big issue here about your kind of economic independence and your status as an individual. So what happened with Libra is that it got shut down by the global central banks. They turned around and said there is no way you are getting to do this, Facebook. It's not going to get beyond our regulators.
They jumped off board, did they? They'd supported it and then said no. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were. I think it was the French that first said this isn't going to. There's no way this is going to swing. We're not going to allow a competitor currency launched by a massive kind of like global corporation that's already under investigation for monopolistic practices in the US and allow it to take away. Because, currency is power. The people who issue the currency in your country are the ones that, get to do everything. So there's no way you're going to hand that to Mark Zuckerberg.
There you go. That was the short answer.
Sorry.
No, I'm pleased I asked. Fascinating stuff. Okay, we have another financial story, believe it or not, from Holden after this. Okay, Holden, you are finishing the show. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
will green money keep you in the black?
We could see the writing very clearly on the wall. And I did a program in Easter Island to measure, to mark the beginning of the new millennium of the 21st century. And I stood in front of those great memorials to a broken civilization and said, look, this is an example of what happens if you don't care about the environment. And I think for the very first time, as far as I was concerned, I said, not that we have to change the way that we look after the natural world, but we are going to have to change the political structures that we've got. We're going to have to change our everyday lives. We're going to have to change our diets, I said 20 years ago. And nobody took a blind bit of notice, really. I mean, the programme went out, nobody said anything, really, much.
The very distinctive sound of Sir David Attenborough in conversation with Greta Thunberg for BBC Radio 4. Holden, what, at the age of 93, has Sir David been up to this week?
What's happened is that the so-called Attenborough effect has reached the world of personal finance, with the suggestion that David Attenborough's programmes and his increasing willingness to take on an active campaigning role around climate change is inspiring a surge in demand for environmentally friendly investments. The Mail on Sunday had a report last weekend in which they surveyed various financial advisors and asset managers, and they all reported growing interest in sustainable investments, particularly ones with an environmental tinge to them. One Lion Trust said its environmental funds had trebled from 2.5 billion to 7.5 billion pounds since 2017, and they attributed that shift to Blue Planet 2, which is the David Attenborough programme that's already been credited with worldwide policy changes on plastic bags and ocean waste.
Okay, and do you believe it? I mean, is it as simple as that? You know, David Attenborough makes a documentary about turtles that get trapped in plastic bags and suddenly the world changes its investment portfolio? Or do you think maybe we were moving in a green direction anyway, and, you know, as he said, he's just made another programme because he's been around so long, and 20 years later it's had a different effect?
There's clearly been a big shift in the conversation overall. A lot of different factors have probably contributed to this, but I think it probably is telling that this report was in the Mail on Sunday rather than, say, The Guardian or even the Financial Times. Like, this is, you know, if there's any paper that is a bastion of Middle England, it's the Mail on Sunday. And if you have their finance pages who are speaking to a demographic who are probably approaching retirement, who are probably looking at their pension funds in quite a hard-nosed way, and if you have financial advisors telling those people that it's not just about virtue either, these are good investments because A, there is demand for them, but also because companies that are environmentally responsible are going to be responsible in other ways, and they're going to grow in a more sustainable manner, and they're going to have a business model that works in the decades to come.
And Suchandrika, if the Mail on Sunday's demographic are getting round to sustainable investment now, does that mean that the market actually hasn't been moving at pace with younger people's ethical shopping decisions? Yeah,
well, it's interesting that I really agree with what Holden said about this demographic, like this being the target audience, because actually it seems to me that this piece is in many ways an advert for the Netflix show that he's got, which is also called Life on Our Planet. And they found a really good angle to make it work for the Mail on Sunday's Money Sunday readers. So it's like, oh, maybe you should put your money into sort of green stuff and it will work for you, because the actual title of the headline is How to Profit as Green Firms Embrace the Attenborough Effect. So it's really about the reader profiting from this, as well as this is the way trends are going in finance and this is the way people are thinking. So I think it's amazing just angling of a story which is really about a new Netflix show.
But younger people for years, is my point, have probably been trying to invest, haven't they, in sustainable funds, and maybe not found it as easy as this piece makes it sound that it is.
I mean, yeah, possibly. Does it only take an Attenborough to change that is the interesting thing? Or is it the fact that we're kind of talking about climate change in terms of climate emergency these days? It's in the papers more often. Even we've got a pandemic going on, we are still talking about these issues. And so the financial world is looking at where next to go. How can we appeal to people? And this seems like the next step.
John, how easy is it to adapt your investments I mean, I know, for example, that many Muslim people will only invest in halal funds, won't they, that preclude alcohol, for example. Is it as straightforward as that to invest in green ones? You just say, give me a portfolio of stuff that's sustainable?
It's not hard. It's extremely easy, and ethical investing has been around for a long, long time. I think the very first ethical fund was launched in the 1970s or certainly the 80s. However, it's definitely true to say that investors are putting a lot more money into green funds at the moment. Last year, we put about 8.9 billion into these funds, which was more than double what we did in 2018. And this year, we've already put 10 billion in. So it's growing fast. It's not just the Attenborough effect. The Attenborough effect, I mean, Suchandrika was absolutely right. That's a PR story. It's a nice news hook to hang a financial story on. And I will also just defend the Mail on Sunday's finance section, but they have some of the best financial journalists in the kind of media. So I think, it's a very good section. But just to be clear, I mean, funds are easy to find. I don't know how many of you necessarily invest on your own behalf, but in most companies, in your workplace pension, for example, there will quite often be an ethical option. And all that means is that the fund that it buys will invest in stocks that the fund manager thinks are ethical, probably avoiding things like weapons and tobacco and other things like that. There is a problem, obviously, which is that,
they don't make as much money?
Well, no, it's just that everyone's ethics are different. So
yes.
One of the big issues with this is that, it's at the moment the fad is for, ethical investing has been called lots of different things. At the moment it's ESG investing, which is environmental, social and governance. And what that means is these are all factors that the fund manager is meant to look at before they invest in a company. However, there's no sort of benchmark for this. Or rather, there's about a dozen different benchmarks and they all disagree. So for example, Tesla will be high up as an ethical company on one person's measurements, but low down on another. Various other companies, some people, and also there's different practices. So it's rather than not buying oil companies, you might try to buy an oil company that's the best one in its sector in order to encourage them to move further in a kind of, a green direction. So it's easy to just buy a fund. What's hard is making sure that it actually matches up to your ethical aspirations, if you like.
And also, there is the point, Holden, about whether or not you'll make a profit. I mean, that is what's, you don't use investment funds to nudge people towards green behaviour unless you think you're going to make a profit out of it as well. You'd use other means, wouldn't you? And has there been a change there? Is it more likely that you can profit from renewable energy, for example, than it used to be?
Yeah, I think that there's a few parts to that. One is that if you're talking about pension funds in particular, you still have a fund manager who will be looking for profitable examples of green companies, ethically managed companies, whatever the additional criteria are. But also there has been a shift, I think, in the sense of where growth is coming from, particularly in the energy sector, to look at that as an example. And there's been a few reports recently saying that that we're approaching a tipping point where old school fossil fuel companies that aren't changing their business model towards a renewable approach are very quickly going to be abandoned by investors who just aren't going to see any prospect of growth there, while at the same time you have new energy companies who base their business model entirely on renewables, or you have the old school oil companies who are making that shift and are beginning to invest in wind farms and other forms of carbon-free energy. Those are the areas where there's going to be growth. They're going to be returning more profits, and so fund managers, individual investors will start to shift their money into them instead.
And that's fascinating, isn't it, Suchandrika? I mean, when we were kids, we were always told in science class that fossil fuels would end eventually because we'd run out of them, not because the market has tipped businesses into investing in renewable energy because it's actually cheaper and because there's a long-term investment in it. I mean, it is the market moving things, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't trip off the tongue as easily for children. It is the market moving it, definitely, but there's also just the news that we see probably once a week, the new terrible milestone that's been reached in terms of climate change. So the one this week that I noticed was sleeping giant Arctic methane deposits starting to release, scientists find. So this is the horrible realisation that as Arctic ice melts, more methane is released into the atmosphere, and methane speeds up climate change. So that makes me feel very passive and helpless and like, oh, should we give up? Like, that's beyond what we can do. And what you have with these investments is something that we can actually take control of, or we can actually do, as Emma Wall says in the Mail on Sunday piece very nicely, like putting your money where your morals are is easier than ever. And we have been doing that, for instance, with bail funds around the Black Lives Movement protests in the US. And now we can try and do that with green investments too.
I think that is one of the reasons why I picked this as Story of the Week, apart from clearly falling from the PR element of David Attenborough, who I'm a huge admirer and was irresistibly drawn towards. But it does feel that this is, often...
And his documentary is now on Netflix.
It does feel that often capitalism, environmentalism are seen as being in competition with each other, and clearly they often are. But this is a way in which capitalism is actually driving the change towards a new form of economy in certain ways, because, as you said, Ollie, it looks quite likely that the shift of money is actually going to force the abandonment of fossil fuels before we reach the end of their natural stocks. It's just going to become uneconomical to extract them.
Because why would you invest in a company that's going downhill?
That has no future.
It's been driven by good things. Solar power is coming down in price, so it makes economic sense to do more solar power than oil. America entered the oil kind of war, if you like, whenever it started doing fracking, and that basically bankrupted, a lot of the kind of Gulf producers. So suddenly you had this massive disruption in the oil sphere that then led to, kind of greater competition from renewables, because everyone realised, oh, wait a minute, this is unsustainable at these prices. So I guess my point is you can end up doing good things without really necessarily having the best intentions. And I think a lot of the time that's what is actually happening here. Everyone is getting a benefit from this that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the environment. But if the end kind of result is that we do get a nicer environment out of it, then that's a good thing.
Well, doing good things without necessarily having the best intentions for 200 episodes now. That is it for this edition of The Week Unwrapped. My thanks to John and Suchandrika and Holden. Our entire back catalogue, all 200 episodes, folks, count them, are available now. Just search for The Week Unwrapped on your ethical podcast app of choice. I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Emma Corsham at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to Unwrap next week, bye-bye.